There are no credible threats, but that doesn't mean that people need to let their guard down. We do holiday patrols. We do instruct our officers out there on patrol in their uniform to pass by houses of worship. They'll park in front of the house of worship and talk to people. We'll do crossings in front of the synagogues, the churches, the mosques during the holidays. We are out there. We are visible. But again, please call us. You call me, just say hello.
Thank you, Mr. Mendez.
Yeah,
Yes,
detective, right?
Detective Lieutenant.
Yeah, detective lieutenant. I'm one of the, good evening, by the way. Thank you for being here. I'm one of the ethnic sensitivity trainers at the Nassau County Police Academy since 2007. And at times, sometimes the classes don't get to see a diverse group of ethnic sensitivity trainers. It's either a Latino or a Sikh or a Muslim. How do we help you? Got a legislator here. I'm a former government official. How do we help you make a case with the commissioner to expand the ethnic sensitivity training of our police officers to make sure that they understand within the cultures that they police how they could perhaps improve the relationship so that there's more reporting or there's more comfortableness? Because it's only 8 hours, and out of those 8 hours of ethnic sensitivity training, 4 is video classroom hours, and then the other 4 are actual engagement of the trainers.
Well, we're lucky right now. We have a very community-minded police commissioner. He's very receptive. My best advice would be to call him and set up an appointment. He meets with the community frequently. He's probably the most accessible commissioner I've ever met.
We'll set up. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Next we have my good friend Rabbi Art Vernon, from the local temple in West Hempstead. And after the massacre terrorist act in Pittsburgh, he organized a very impressive interfaith event at his temple. So thank you very much. Let's hear for Rabbi Art Vernon of the congregation Carrié Shalom.
Shalom, salam. I don't know how to say it. Peace is peace in Christian circles. So only us Jews and us Muslims have our own secret languages. I don't know where to begin. I guess begin at the beginning. Thank you, Carrié Solages, for convening this meeting tonight. We are in your debt. When Carrié called me, he said, I'm convening. I said, where and what time? I didn't let him finish. Where and what time? I'll be there. It is an inconvenient week for a rabbi, right, Rabbi Pro? It's an inconvenient week for Jews to be at a public meeting. We have a lot of work to do to get ready for Passover on Friday night. But I am struck with the, what I would call fortunate synergy of the holidays of the major faiths this year. This very weekend, when we Jews are going to be observing Passover, there's also Holy Week. Holy Thursday, Good Friday, I forget what Saturday is called, that's the name also, and then Easter Sunday. And then a week and a half later, May 5th or 6th, is the beginning of Ramadan, the holiest season of our Muslim brothers and sisters. How many of you knew that? Good. You're probably more informed than the average member of Nassau County. Okay? The average member of Nassau County probably has no idea. They may know that Passover and Easter are coming together. But if you ask the average person in Nassau County, when is Ramadan? What is Ramadan? The Hebrew Bible has a very interesting phrase, Ve'ahavta l'reyecha hamocha. Now, there's always a problem with translating from one language into another. How do you translate into one language into another? So ve'ahavta is love. But as we all know, love is a term that we bandy about. There are all kinds of love. We're clearly not talking about erotic love in this kind of love. We're talking more like the Greek term agape, which is the kind of non-sexual intimacy that brings people together, that allows people to know each other at a profound level, to feel things for each other. I'll come back to that in a minute. Rhea. It's often translated your brother. It's not your brother, it's your neighbor. Your neighbor. Not somebody related to you by blood, but someone related to you by propinquity. Someone who is in your neighborhood. Someone who lives around you. And I'm not necessarily talking about the people on your block. Go a few more blocks, okay? Not necessarily your block, but a few more blocks. That person's your Rhea also. And then it says kamocha. And this is interesting. Like yourself, as yourself. So here's a rabbinic, we'll call it homily, on this. What does this mean? Two people are in a boat in the middle of the ocean. Okay? Two people are in a boat in the middle of the ocean. Well, you know, being in a boat in the middle of the ocean in the old days was a pretty dangerous thing to be. One takes out a drill and starts drilling under his seat. Now, it wasn't a power drill. There was no electricity in the middle of the ocean. Hand drill. The other says, what are you doing? I'm drilling a hole in the boat under my seat. And the other says, but it's going to sink the entire boat. Said, but it's my seat. And that's the term kamocha. You cannot drill a hole in the boat that everybody is in under your seat, because it's going to affect everybody in the boat. And that's something we haven't learned yet. We haven't learned yet that fundamentally we are all in the same boat. We are all residents of the same earth. And it doesn't matter whether we live in Asia, whether we live in Africa, whether we live in North America or South America or wherever we live. As big as this world is, it's finite. It's finite. And we all live in the same earth. I'm old enough not to have marched with Dr. King, but to remember seeing Dr. King on television, the famous March on Washington. And as I was a teenager at the time, no way my parents would have let me go. I was a teenager at the time watching, and I was impressed at the diversity of religious leadership marching with Dr. King, that March on Washington. Very impressed. And then the usual speeches. It's always great hearing Mahalia Jackson. If you don't know what Mahalia Jackson is, okay, look it up on the internet. You can see her, on YouTube or whatever. Amazing voice. One of the best singers we've, ever, in my opinion. Okay, and the usual words and speeches. And then, of course, Dr. King gave his famous "I Have a Dream" speech. And in his speech were, for me, the foundational words of what we're all about. I have a dream that one day, he talks about black and white, Protestant and Jew, and then he says that my children will be judged on the content of their character rather than the color of their skin. The content of their character rather than the color of their skin. It sounds so simple. And yet we have failed, many of us, we have failed to internalize the meaning of that simple phrase. We have failed to teach our children the meaning of that simple phrase. You need to get beyond the externals to get to know the person's character before we make evaluations of whether someone is a good person or not a good person, someone who has something to offer or someone who's just, hanging out, taking up space. Can't make that judgment, and yet we all do. We all do. We all do. And part of the reason is that we just don't know each other. even though we live in propinquity, we don't really know each other. So I hope I'm not going to be casting aspersions on anybody, because the anecdote I'm about to tell, the story I'm about to tell, is about two Russians. Two Russians who were drinking. We'll call them Ivan and Boris. And Ivan, and they're really deep in their cups, okay? Feeling no pain. And Ivan says to Boris, "Do you love me?" And Boris says, "Of course I love you. But do you really love me? I love you. Do you know what causes me pain?" "How could I know what causes you pain? Then you don't really love me." If we don't know what causes our neighbor pain, and do everything we can to comfort our neighbor in pain, and ameliorate our neighbor's pain, then we're really not loving our neighbor as ourselves. Because fundamentally, each and every one of us seeks pleasure and tries to avoid pain. It's not enough that we are not a source of pain to our neighbor. We need to be more proactive than that. We need to comfort our neighbor and help alleviate our neighbor's pain and suffering to the extent that we can. I'm never disappointed with the size of the crowd in the room. Never, ever disappointed. Because I've always worked with the principle, the people who want to participate will be there. And the people who aren't there, they may have all kinds of reasons why they're not there, good reasons, bad reasons, whatever, they're not interested. Doesn't matter. Because the people who are here have shared this evening, have heard the message, and now those of us who have been doing this for a while, okay, we now have some more recruits in all of you who are going to take the messages that you've heard here tonight from all of us, and you're going to go probably tell 3, 4, 5. I went to this most interesting program that Legislator Solages convened, and this is what I learned. By the way, if you don't do that, you might as well not be here. Might as well not be here. Sometime in the next week, you've got to tell 4 or 5 people who are not here tonight something that you got out of being here. And then maybe, I heard something interesting, and they'll tell 4 or 5 other people. When Eleanor Roosevelt died, and very few people in the room remember when Eleanor Roosevelt died. I do. I'm just that old. Adlai Stevenson, another name you never heard of, eulogized her and said of Eleanor Roosevelt, she would rather light a candle than curse the darkness. She would rather light a candle than curse the darkness. Now here's the interesting thing about lighting candles. And you all know this. You all know this. You light one candle, and then use that candle to light another candle. And the light of the first candle is not diminished. And then you light another candle. And the light of the first candle and the second candle is not diminished. And that's why I said what I said. You telling 5 people, you're the candle, lighting 5 other candles, who will light other candles. And if each of us keeps lighting candles, the light will continue to grow until all the candles are lit. And as I've often said, the thing that chases away ignorance is the light of knowledge. Ignorance hides in the dark. It cannot hide in the light. So let us each be a light of knowledge, demonstrating that we, each of us, do love our neighbors as ourselves and keep lighting candles.
Wasn't he great? That was awesome. Thank you so much, Rabbi. We have now Mr. Kevin Shakil from America's Islamophobia.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much to Legislator Solages for having this forum. I'd like to thank everybody for coming out tonight, especially Carrié and Professor Long Island. We have about 7 to 10 members here today, and this might seem like a one-on event that we held in the community. We have this every other Wednesdays in Mineola, and the members that come out are Muslim, Catholic, Christian, Jews, believe in religion, not believe in religion, and we engage. Rabbi Vernon as well. He comes, he sees everything. So we appreciate you for coming out. It's all about being one. I mean, we have these events right after a major event. Look at the room tonight. If this would have happened a week after the massacre in New Zealand, I guarantee you the room would have been full. We're reactive, not proactive. So I think we have to be more proactive in coming together and spreading the message of peace and showing that, hey, we're all one. That it doesn't matter what background you're from, what religion you're from, that we're all one, that we're all human. And on top of this is the reason why we started American Islamic Radio, to break down barriers to those narratives, the stereotypes that come along with being Muslim in America. To break down those barriers, to know what halal meat is, and halal is just not chicken over rice, but there's a meaning behind it. That why Muslims pray 5 times a day, why woman and male who are Muslim cannot sit together or intermingle together. It's to break down those barriers, to show people what Islam really is, to show what being Muslim in America really is, to break down those barriers. Because you don't have to be Muslim or you don't have to be American, you don't have to make a choice. They go hand in hand together. You're a Muslim and you're a Muslim American, or you're an American Muslim, it goes hand in hand. That's why we started American Islamic Radio. We're based out of Mineola, and we're doing great. And the number one thing I've always tell people about American Islamic Radio is that when I reached out to local Muslims about this radio station, about starting it, I got nothing but negativity. But when I went across the aisle and met Louis Mendez and Jorge Guzman, who are not Muslim, and I ran the idea by them, they said, let's do it. So that just shows that it doesn't matter what religion you are. If you find good people, there's good people everywhere you go. And then when you find good people, stick with them, stay strong with them, and just keep going. I had a teacher in high school, a social studies teacher. And I was fortunate enough to learn Islam from him because, when you're in 10th grade, you have to learn Islamic studies. And when he came down to Islamic studies in that grade, the first thing he said that when the Muslims fled Mecca and they went to Abyssinia, what is now Ghana, I believe, there was a Christian king who took the Muslims in. And the pagans of Mecca, they went to the Christian king and said, here, we're going to give you gold if you give us these Muslims back. And the Christian king said, why do you want them so badly? And he said, oh, they practice this, they do this is what they teach. They're going against your Christian God. And when the Muslims explained to them what their religion really was, they were in the throne room, and there was 3 lights coming down in the throne room. And he said that even though that the lights are beaming down separately, it all comes from the same source. At the end of the day, we're all from one. Doesn't matter if you're a Jew or a Christian, a Muslim, a Catholic, doesn't matter. The source is the same. So we have to spread peace, and we have to be together. And we should have more of these events. And thank you, Legislator Solages, for having this.
And last but not least, before we have some brief questions, we have Mr. Robert Sokov, Director of the AJC of Long Island. Please come forward, Robert. Thank you.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming out, and it's a pleasure to see you all. I'm not going to talk about religion or God or your souls or your salvation. I just don't know enough for myself, never mind for a crowd of people. What I am going to say is we are beyond fortunate to live in a country that has built itself up to what this country has become, which is a nation of laws and a nation of rights. There's nothing that's given to you where you have to be thankful for it. There's no bill of gifts. There's a bill of rights. Everyone sitting in this room has rights. And I'm sorry to say that there are many, many small groups and individuals trying to tear this community and this country and its character and its spirit asunder. I'm with the American Jewish Committee. We're an advocacy group. What does that mean? It means we use the Constitution, we use the Bill of Rights, we use laws that are everybody's tools and weapons to use in defense of our freedoms and our rights. And we approach government with it. We approach them as partners, we approach them as friends. If necessary, we approach them as adversaries on subjects. Because it's not the person or the party, it's the position and the policy that you want to see done or make changes to. And everybody in this room, you've got them. You've got those rights, you've got the terrible responsibility of having those rights. If something's going on that's a crime, contact Detective Lieutenant Rothenberg. He'll make sure that everything's addressed or at least locked down and identified. If you have a problem with the local government, Mr. Solages is right here to be your doorway, a doormat too. Walk through him, walk over him, use him, get to where you've got to get to. I'm sorry to say, the 1950s are over. That happy time when everybody just let everything go on self-pilot and we just kept growing as a nation, as an economy and all that. But guess what? I'm glad it's not the 1950s. Because in the 1950s, I can't be a waiter in certain clubs out here because I'm Jewish. And if you're not even Jewish, forget it. You're not going to be a porter, you're not going to be a dishwasher. I'm glad I live now. I have a responsibility to my children and the next generation for now. You do too. Sorry to be the one to break that news to you. We're responsible. We're the generation that has to pick it up. There are men and women dying abroad for the ideals that this country is built upon. Nobody in this room is being asked to put everything on the line. What we're asking everyone to do is pick a subject, pick something that you feel you can handle, and start. Roll up your sleeves and start. If you can't roll up your sleeves, call somebody you know. Say, you know, I was just thinking, want to get together over a cup of coffee and discuss X, Y, Z? That's how it starts. Talk, and also don't keep talking to the same characters who populate your life. I've met people in this room 3 or 4 times and we've never gone out for a cup of coffee. We've never had a discussion. We've never shared an idea. Guess what? We're not going to grow the group that way. And advocacy, like everything else in America, is all about numbers. There's a number of people in this room. Mr. Solages, thank you for calling us together. I look forward to you calling us together again. I'm going to be quiet now so people can ask questions. We can have the dialogue we're all here to have. But thank you so much for coming. Please keep your rights, defend your rights, use your rights, and most of all, know your rights. Thank you.
First question for the panel would be, what do you believe are the biggest causes of religious intolerance, hatred, and violence? I know somebody mentioned that already, but anyone would like just to add to that question? Yes, Rabbi.
All right, so I'm going to make a commercial now. May 1st is Holocaust Memorial Day, and we got a really big program at our congregation, 711 Dogwood Avenue. It's co-sponsored by the Jewish Community Relations Council, by the Holocaust Memorial and Tolerance Center, and by the Nassau County Commission on Human Rights. So we politicians, religious leaders, and the reason I mention it is this question about whatever. One of the things that we do is we give people a kind of a booklet of readings, and we discovered something that I've never seen before, but it's there on the internet. It's called the Pyramid of Hate. At the top of the Pyramid of Hate is what? Genocide. Annihilation of a group of people because of their beliefs. Now, obviously, in our age, the Holocaust was I would call it the ultimate example. But there are other examples. There are other examples. South Sudan, the Yazidis. There are other examples. And somebody pointed out earlier, I don't remember who was it, that I mean, it was Reverend no, I think you pointed out, that probably most of the slaves who were brought to the United States, and I'll say something about that, were Muslim, black Muslims. Okay. And completely denuded of their Muslim heritage. Stripped completely of their Muslim heritage. So what happens is words, hateful words, and then things escalate, and at some point violence, and then, mass murder. We've seen the escalation of words leading to certain acts, and unfortunately, in the last number of years, we've seen murder. I don't care whether you call it hate crimes or terrorism, it's murder, okay? I don't care whether it's in a church, or a mosque, or a synagogue, or a nightclub, or an office complex, or a school, it's murder. And it comes from the same place. Hate.
In recent years, we have seen more of a polarization of the body politic, where the left and the right seem entrenched in their views. Do you believe that this polarization creates and emphasizes these types of hatred?
Who wants? Both the lawyer, polarization.
Nobody wants to touch politics. Okay, except you. I think that the polarization between the left and the right is dangerous only in the sense that it has built walls that have, unfortunately, been built high enough and strong enough that we can't see the basic morality that should transcend politics. So to the extent that we know, for example, that humanity is hurting, and that those people who are dying, whether we're talking about immigration policies or otherwise, whether we're talking about demonization of refugees, whatever your belief is on these kinds of matters, reality is that people are dying. And when we use politics to not only negate that idea, but to make it worse by demonizing people and dehumanizing them, then that is a problem for everyone across the aisle of politics. So we need to get beyond that polarization and come back to the very basis of our humanity.
Anyone else would like to shed light on that question?
Polarization?
Yes.
Look,
I will, because I think that you see it on both parties. And when you have leaders, and I don't care what political party you belong to, but when you have leaders that call, whether it be a religion or a race or an ethnic group, and you classify them as some sort of criminal, or you demean them, or you insult that group, if you have children and they're listening to this, you want your children to read the papers, you want your children to watch the news. Well, here they are listening to these leaders who, listen, if it's my congressperson, president, vice president, legislator, whoever it may be, if they're saying that about a group, and I'm supposed to follow my whoever it is, well then, who am I listening to? Am I saying I don't listen to my political leader or my government? Or am I saying, well, that's wrong? It has a horrible message that it sends. And of course, it's not just the children that's hearing it, it's all of us that are hearing it. And if we have certain beliefs or thoughts or feelings, and now we're hearing this, well, let's see, they feel the way I do, so I must be right. And this is where I think we have a dangerous scenario.
we get the leaders we deserve. If we allow our elected officials to say these kinds of things unchallenged, then we get the leaders we deserve, because it succeeds, it gets them elected, and unfortunately, I mean, you know, Winston Churchill said it, democracy is a terrible system, it's just the best one we've been able to figure out. And it's a terrible system because the people who want to run for office have to create a coalition to get elected. And it means they have to somehow figure out what's going to bring a large enough group of people together, enough together to identify with that politician to be elected. And fortunately or unfortunately, over the last 30, 40 years, it's turned out that negative messages are more effective in solidifying the electorate than positive messages. But whose fault is that? It's not the politician's fault, it's our fault. It's our fault that we attend to the negative messages, that we allow the negative messages to steer us in the favor of this politician or that politician or the other politician. It's very, very easy to stand up and say, I'm against this, I'm against that, I'm against the other thing. It's very easy. But what are you for? What are you for? And I want to say that from my involvement to some extent in our governmental stuff over the last several years, in spite of the fact that Nassau County has some very, very serious issues in terms of, I'll call it community integration. Some serious issues of community integration. We're not as integrated as we think we are, or would like to be. We don't hear the kinds of divisive language, divisive rhetoric from our local officials that we hear sometimes from officials at other levels of government. And thank God for that. But again, as you came here to hear us, how are politicians, how do politicians know? They know because we tell them. Remember, elected officials work for us. They don't work for themselves. They don't have any money. We give them our taxes, right? You all did that yesterday, right? We all gave them our tax money, all right? Voluntarily, involuntarily. We gave them our tax money. And now because we gave them our tax money, we have the right to say, and this is what we expect because we gave you our tax money. So I have next to my computer the email addresses of a whole bunch of elected officials. And if any of them says something that bothers me, email goes out. Now I don't name call. I simply say, I strongly support your position on da-da-da-da-da-da. I vehemently oppose your position on da-da-da-da-da. I don't expect to get an answer. But if 3 people send an email, if 300 people send an email, or 3,000 send an email, or 30,000 send an email, okay? So if we don't say anything, when we hear divisive statements made by politicians, we don't say anything. We say, oh, I just don't agree with it. They're going to keep doing it. They're going to keep doing it. Because we didn't say anything, they assume it works. So we have to accept some of the responsibility for the divisive rhetoric. We can put an end to it by essentially calling politicians out and use it.
Thank you, Rabbi Pro.
I'd like us to think about where did we get our morale? And I think everyone here would agree that our religion gave us our morale. Right? If you go to, from a non-religious perspective, then morale is completely, goes out the window. Why? Because your rationale will justify something that is not moral because it's good for you, survival of the fittest. That's essentially what lack of religion is, it's lack of morale. I understand and I believe and I follow that there's separation of church and state. But I don't think that has to equate with separation of morale and human beings, right? I feel that here, I would trust anyone here to be in politics, and they would have my vote, including Legislator Solages, because of the conversations that are happening here and the trust and the faith to a superior, authority. which is something that goes with us wherever we are, 24/7. And I feel that if you remember, President Obama was shown in a garb, an African garb, and he had a hat on, and it was leaked into the media that, he was Muslim. Everyone remember that? Everyone remember that? Do you know who leaked that? It was learned later that it was Hillary's party that had leaked that image. That's when they were going at odds with each other to run for that position. And it's like the morale is not there even within parties. And then we know other, obviously, incidents that have happened. So I think the polarization is a direct result of not connecting with our faiths, rather than the opposite narrative, which is against all religions, is that if you're religious, then you're an extremist, or if you're religious, you're biased. I think the polarization would be diminished if we were comfortable talking about our religiosity, because to me, and I think everyone would do the same here, I'm not going to support a Muslim over justice. My loyalty is with justice because of Islam. And I won't support a Muslim if he's unjust. And I expect the same from all the religious leaders. And I feel like that conversation right there.
I'm mostly concerned also about the way anti-Semitism and Islamophobia is affecting our young people. Have you observed through your interactions with young people in your mosque or your temple the way these different forms of hate have been internalized? Have you witnessed that, and can you shed any light upon that?
Well, I can share personal views on that because when the atrocity day of 9/11 happened, I was in 4th grade, and growing up from 4th grade to now, obviously I was bullied. Before I even knew what my religion was, what are you, 8 years old in 4th grade? You have no idea what religion is. And being bullied for my religion at a very young age, and then growing up, trying to figure out what the religion is, opposed to what's being supported in the media and whatnot, I mean, yeah, it's affected people like me, but it also makes you stronger because you come out of a shell, you toughen up more. But I don't think our youth today should be going through this at all. I mean, I have 2 little girls. I don't want them to experience even an ounce of an experience growing up. But the way to combat that is to continue having these kind of forums, to continue having this conversation where we all come together and we all say hate is wrong. An attack on one religion is an attack on all religions. And if we continue having these conversations, these kind of questions will never have to come up.
Even though I was the guy who said that I'm going to let everybody else handle the spirituality, a lot of us have holidays coming up, and that means family, that means gathering together, congregating. It's an opportune time for you to open up a conversation on something right out of the newspaper, like, hey, what do you guys think about the whole Muslim ban that they're still trying to push? Or did anybody hear about that West Virginia State House poster, the one with the trade centers on the top and the Ilhan Omar on the bottom? You're going to have a crowd of people that you don't normally see throughout the year during this upcoming holiday season. It's an opportune time for you to open the door to some idea sharing.
So unfortunately, I have seen and witnessed and shed tears with youth who have experienced Islamophobia and prejudice and bigotry at its worst. I will start out by saying that it's not just one particular group. We know what's happening on the southern border. Again, I'm not going to ask you what your views are, but we've had many Latino kids throughout our public school systems who are sitting there in a cafeteria. When the cafeteria breaks up, breaks out into a chant that says, "Build that wall." So you can understand what it means for that little kid who's listening to the chants. But I'll give you a couple of scenarios here. Scenario number 1, and these are real life experiences. Earlier on with CARE New York, I was asked to help at a hearing, a suspension hearing of a youth in high school. This youth was, I believe, a junior at the time, and he was constantly being bullied because of his Muslim-sounding name. They would tell him, "So-and-so, when are you bringing a bomb to school? so-and-so let us know so we're not in school that day. And it kept going on and on and on and on. And this young guy never said anything back. And one day a substitute teacher heard them saying those things to him, and rather than calling out the bullies, she alerted security on the one that was being bullied. Now, I don't know if you know this, but most school systems, and New York City public school systems, school security is linked with NYPD. So when security at the school is alerted, so is NYPD. This kid was pulled out of his class. He was taken to a precinct. He was questioned without his parents. His social media was gone through. And he was suspended from school. When they called us, I was not just thinking about the bullying issue. I'm thinking about how is this kid ever going to get into college with something like that on his record? I'm thinking that's possibility of a criminal attorney needing to be called. Now, lucky for us, this kid was as clean can be. Never went to a controversial website, even though he's permitted to do that. And that doesn't make you a criminal. And his way of letting go of the hurt and pain that he was feeling was through poetry, of all things. This kid never held an ounce of resentment for his tormentors of various years. And when we finally got through everything, turns out that this kid wasn't even Muslim. He just had a Muslim-sounding name. I have another young lady who, along with her friend, her best friend, decided in middle school around that they're going to start covering with a hijab, a headscarf. And one of them was going to wear a niqab, which is a full face cover. The two of them were going to support one another through this next phase in their life. They were getting teased so relentlessly that it was breaking them down. And one of them, the one in the hijab, the headscarf, decided she just couldn't do it anymore. So she took it off. The other one kept going. And when I heard the young girl's story, she was sobbing, not just because of the relentless bullying, but this anguish of guilt that she felt for being too weak and not being able to support her own belief and her sister's belief. These are just two very small stories, and I told you that 20 to 25% of Muslim youth face anti-religious bullying, and oftentimes they're not just by other kids, even by administrators. We have those cases all the time as well. And I ask you to be conscientious of it, and yes, to bring up the conversations at your dinner table. And make sure that your kids understand that it's not okay, that they have a role to play. God knows I teach my kids, number one, if they ever bully, that's not even a joke in my house. And secondly, if they ever witnessed bullying and didn't stand up for that person and didn't specifically go to that table and offer comfort to that person, they would get it just as badly. We have kids' lives that are at stake here. And when kids have to second guess their identity and who they are walking in and out of a classroom, that's a problem.
Have you witnessed young members of your temple or Jewish organizations who are coping or dealing with the anti-Semitic rhetoric?
Right now, and Detective Lieutenant probably can get better numbers than I can, but in Nassau County, anti-Semitism has increased 70%. This is one of the numbers I've heard in the last couple of years. It's high. The numbers are going up dramatically. I have been called into actually numerous schools in Nassau County recently, 3 just in the last month, who have had serious anti-Semitism issues. And the problem becomes, first of all, what causes someone to do such a thing? And then what do we do about it? One of the things, though, that I have said in numerous cases, and I said it before, it's lack of education. But the lack of education, and this is across the board for all religions, I sometimes think the kids think they're being funny, cool, you know, look at me, now I can be like popular in my group because look what I just did, I put a swastika on the wall, right? When you do something like that, it's, first of all, where are they thinking it's from? And it was just said before, which I don't think that I'll probably even say, but have the conversations at home. Explain why this is not acceptable behavior, this is not funny. And you're going to hear people say, and this is about whether it be religion, ethnic groups, truthfully even gender. You hear this and you see this and we have to take a line as adults. We have to say, this is not permissible.
Can I just add one thing, if you don't mind? I apologize, did you want to speak? I just wanted to add that we've been talking a lot about the school setting, but it's not just in schools what kids are facing. Very quickly, when a Muslim family gets pulled over at the border and questioned, the kids are with them. Understand what that does to the kids when other kids are passing by in their cars and are looking at them and making them feel like as if they've somehow done something wrong just by their name or their skin color or their identity. We've had issues right here in Long Island in which a group of youth were praying in a public place. Somebody saw them and called the FBI and they all got FBI visits, right? That's an issue as well. So it happens all the time in public places. And I wanted to add that because I don't want you to think it's just the school setting.
So I wanted to, if any of you have high school kids, our districts are very different. Some districts are more diverse, some districts are less diverse. But one of the things that every high school has to have is some kind of a diversity club. The kids from different groups need to be meeting with kids from other groups, and then that group becomes kind of like the watchdog for the school and the theme group for the school that essentially protects their fellow students, because there's, again, teenagers are like pack animals. I mean, they're like, hordes, and we can use that kind of group cohesive thing. I mean, it can become negative in the sense that that's what a gang is, and obviously we don't. But it become positive if it's a club that is there essentially to learn and support diversity, this can't simply be from the administration that has a zero tolerance policy, but that also, there need to be clear guidelines and policies that are articulated and enforced and whatever from the top down about bullying won't be tolerated and, epithets and name calling and so on. I mean, kids are going to do those things because it's part of the challenge that kids have of growing up and learning what's appropriate, what's not appropriate, finding out their own strengths and covering for their own weaknesses and insecurities. I mean, none of us would, we all kind of say, well, I'd love to have the vigor and the knowledge that I have now and do adolescence again, but I really don't want to do adolescence again. None of us do. It was terrible. I mean, it was challenging. It was stressful. It was, and it wasn't about the homework. So we need to encourage our kids to create support systems for themselves, even on the junior high school level. Some kind of a diversity club where kids can get to know each other across ethnic, racial, and religious lines, and then become a force for positive expression and